My sister invited us to a high-end dinner, then told the host there was only room for her real family while my son and I stood there humiliated. I didn't scream. I just used my connections, ordered the best wine, and waited for her bill to arrive. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The humidity of the late July evening clung to my skin, but I hardly felt it. I was vibrating with a mix of exhaustion and genuine, desperate hope. It had been a brutal month. Between the final deliverables for the rebranding of the Azure in Miami and single-handedly managing Liam's transition into a new summer camp, I felt like I was running on fumes. My spirit was a frayed wire, sparking and sputtering, waiting for a safe place to finally power down. That safe place was supposed to be tonight. "Mom, is this the place with the gold spoons?" Liam asked, tugging on my hand. His 8-year-old face was scrubbed clean, his hair combed to the side with a precision that only held for about 20 minutes. He looked so much like his father in that moment, it made my chest ache. "It is," I said, squeezing his hand. "It's called the Gilded Spoon, remember? Aunt Sophie said it's a very special celebration." "For Oliver's promotion," Liam recited, proud of remembering the details. "Exactly." I took a deep breath as we approached the heavy oak doors. I needed this. I needed family. Since the divorce 2 years ago, the silence in our apartment had grown louder, and moments of inclusion, of being part of a larger tribe, were like water in a desert. When Sophie had called me 3 days ago, her voice bubbling with excitement about Oliver's promotion to regional director, insisting that Liam and I simply had to come, I had nearly cried with relief. It felt like an olive branch. It felt like we were finally being woven back into the tapestry of the family, after a year of them being too busy, or forgetting, to include us in weekend plans. The restaurant was a cathedral of culinary pretension, and I mean that in the best way possible. Low, amber lighting, velvet banquettes, the soft clinking of crystal, and the hum of hushed, expensive conversations. It was the kind of place where the air smelled of truffles and old money. I spotted them immediately near the host's stand. Sophie looked radiant, wearing a silk dress that I knew cost more than my first car, her blonde hair falling in perfectly manicured waves. Oliver stood beside her, checking his watch, looking every bit the corporate conqueror in a sharp navy suit. Their 2 children, Noah and Emma, were already tapping away on iPads, dressed like miniature adults. "Lydia," Sophie called out as she saw us. She didn't move to hug me. She just waved a manicured hand, her smile tight. "You made it, and you brought Liam." The tone was slightly off, just a fraction, like a note played flat. "Of course I brought him," I said, reaching them. "You said it was a family celebration. Hi, Oliver, congratulations." Oliver barely looked up from his phone. "Thanks, Lydia." The host, a young man with a stiff collar and a terrifyingly blank expression, looked up from his podium. "The reservation is ready, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. Your table for 4 is prepared in the main dining room." I paused, my brain stumbled over the number. 4. There were 6 of us. "Oh, there must be a mistake," I said quickly, stepping forward with a polite, professional smile. "It's actually 6. My sister might have miscounted." The host looked at his screen, then at Sophie. Sophie didn't look at me. She was busy adjusting the strap of her purse. "No mistake," she said breezily. "It's a table for 4. The booths only seat 4 comfortably, Lydia. You know how these places are." I froze. The ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to drop away, leaving a ringing silence in my ears. I looked at Liam. He was looking at his cousins, clutching the drawing he had made for his uncle. "Sophie," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "What are you talking about? You invited us. You specifically told me to come at 7. "I invited you to come out," Sophie said, her voice dropping to that patronizing register she used when she thought I was being difficult. "To say hello, to congratulate Oliver. But honestly, Lydia, this is a celebratory dinner. It's expensive. And frankly, Liam is, well, he's energetic. We wanted a nice, quiet meal for our family. Our family. The words hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. The distinction was clear. They were the family. Liam and I were the accessories, the background noise. We drove 45 minutes, I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to lock it down. Liam is dressed up. He made Oliver a card. Oliver finally looked up, annoyance flashing in his eyes. Lydia, don't make a scene. The reservation is for 4. The restaurant is fully booked. You should have called ahead if you assumed you were eating with us. Assumed, I choked out. You invited me. To the gathering, Sophie corrected, as if explaining quantum physics to a toddler. Look, the kids are already hungry. Why don't you guys grab a burger or something nearby? We can catch up later in the week. The host was watching us, his eyes darting between Sophie's dismissive back and my stunned face. Sophie turned to the host, flashing a dazzling smile. We're ready to be seated, just the 4 of us. She grabbed Oliver's arm. They began to walk away. They didn't even look back. My nephew and niece followed, oblivious. I stood there, holding the hand of my 8-year-old son, in the middle of the most exclusive restaurant in the city, while my own sister walked away to eat a dinner I wasn't good enough for. The betrayal was worse than the loneliness. It was a public declaration that we didn't matter. For a solid 10 seconds, I couldn't breathe. It felt as though the oxygen had been sucked out of the foyer, replaced by a thick, suffocating shame. I could feel the eyes of the other patrons in the waiting area boring into my back. They had seen the exchange. They had seen the wealthy couple discard the single mother and her child like unwanted flyers. Mom, Liam's voice was small, trembling. Are we not eating? I looked down. His lower lip was quivering. He was clutching that card, a drawing of Oliver as a superhero, so tight the paper was crinkling. My heart shattered, and then, instantly, it refused itself into something harder, something colder. We are eating, I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. We are absolutely eating. But Aunt Sophie said there's no room. Aunt Sophie, I said, my voice steadying, is wrong. I looked toward the dining room. I could see them being led to a rounded booth near the window. It was a prime spot, but not the best spot. I watched as Sophie slid into the velvet seat, laughing at something Oliver said. She looked relieved to be rid of the baggage, relieved to have her perfect, symmetrical photo op without her divorced sister and her energetic nephew cluttering the frame. My stomach churned with a mixture of nausea and fury. I wanted to grab Liam and run. I wanted to flee to the safety of my car and cry until my eyes swelled shut. That was the old Lydia. The Lydia who apologized for taking up space. The Lydia who had spent the last 3 decades making herself smaller so Sophie could shine brighter. But as I watched Sophie snap her napkin open with a flourish, ignoring the fact that her nephew was standing 40 feet away fighting back tears, something snapped. I remembered the last 3 months. I remembered the late nights I spent reviewing floor plans. I remembered the extensive text threads about lighting fixtures, menu fonts, and server uniforms. Sophie saw a trendy restaurant. She saw a status symbol. She had forgotten one crucial thing: who actually built this place. I wasn't just Lydia, the struggling single mom. I was Lydia, the brand strategist who had taken the gilded spoon from a failing bistro concept to the hottest reservation in the city. I knew every inch of this floor plan. I knew the cost of every ingredient. And more importantly, I knew the owner. I turned back to the host stand. The young man was avoiding my gaze, pretending to study the seating chart. He was uncomfortable, clearly feeling bad, but bound by the hierarchy of the reservation book. "Excuse me," I said. My voice wasn't pleading anymore. It was the voice I used in boardrooms. He looked up, startled. "Ma'am, I really am sorry, but as Mrs. Sterling said, we are fully committed tonight. The wait list is 3 weeks out." "I'm not asking for a table from the list," I said calmly. "Is Jean Paul here tonight?" The host blinked. "Mr. Dubois, the general manager." "Yes, tell him Lydia is here. Tell him I'm looking at the chef's table." The host's demeanor shifted from pity to confusion. I can check if he's available, but... Just tell him, I said, leaning in slightly. Tell him Lydia says the lighting in the foyer is still set too cool. It was a code, a running joke we had during the design phase. The host hesitated, then nodded. He picked up the earpiece receiver. One moment. I squeezed Liam's hand. Buddy, do you trust me? He looked up, eyes wide. Yes. Good, because we aren't getting burgers. We're going to have the best dinner of your life. I looked back at Sophie's table. She was ordering drinks, gesturing wildly. She had no idea that the ground beneath her feet was about to shift. She thought she held all the cards because she had the husband, the money, and the reservation. But she was playing a game of checkers, and she didn't realize she was sitting across from a grandmaster. To understand why that meant at the host stand broke me, you have to understand the history of Sophie and Lydia. It wasn't just one dinner. It was a lifetime of me being the soil and Sophie being the flower. Our parents had always been enamored with Sophie. She was the beauty, the charmer, the one who demanded attention and received it as her birthright. I was the practical one, the smart one, the one who fixed things. When Sophie failed college algebra, I tutored her every night for a semester so she wouldn't lose her sorority standing. When she crashed her first car, I drove her to work for 3 months. When she started dating Oliver, I was the one who helped her curate her sophisticated persona, literally picking out the books for her shelves so she would look well-read for his academic parents. I had spent my life curating Sophie's success. And Oliver was the perfect match for her. He was a man who viewed relationships as transactions. He came from old money, not enough to be truly wealthy, but enough to be snobbish about it. He tolerated me when I was married to a corporate lawyer. We fit into his worldview then, but when my husband left and I was suddenly a single mother balancing a consulting career and a child, I became messy. I became a smudge on their pristine windshield. This dinner was supposed to be different. I had actually pulled strings for this reservation. 3 weeks ago, Sophie had called me in a panic. Lydia, you know people in the food world. I need a table at the Gilded Spoon for Oliver's promotion. It's fully booked online. I hadn't told her I worked on the project. I wanted to keep my professional life separate, mostly because Sophie had a habit of trying to exploit my connections for freebies. So, I had just said, let me see what I can do. I had called Jean Paul. I had secured the prime booth. I had even added a note to the file, VIP family, treat them well. I had set the stage for her perfect night. And her way of thanking me was to invite me there as a prop, only to discard me when I didn't fit the aesthetic of her nuclear family celebration. That was the twist of the knife. She wasn't just rejecting her sister. She was rejecting the person who had handed her this night on a silver platter. I looked at them again. Sophie was laughing, tilting her head back, sipping a cocktail that I knew cost $28. Oliver was pointing at the menu, likely explaining the wine list to her with that insufferable arrogance, despite the fact that his knowledge of wine came entirely from reading Wine Spectator headlines. He was wearing a tailored suit, a Rolex that was a little too large for his wrist, and an expression of supreme satisfaction. He looked like a man who believed the world existed to serve him. She looks happy, Liam whispered, following my gaze. She does, I said, my voice hardening. Why doesn't she want us? Because, I said, crouching down to look him in the eye, some people think that love is a pie, and if they share it, there won't be enough left for them. But they're wrong. The host returned, looking pale. Beside him was a man in an immaculate charcoal suit, moving with the grace of a dancer. Jean Paul. His eyes scanned the room and locked onto me. His face broke into a genuine, beaming smile. He bypassed the host's stand entirely, arms wide open. Lydia, he boomed, his French accent thick and warm. Mon Dieu, you are here, and you did not tell me. He embraced me, kissing both cheeks. The host looked like he was about to faint. I tried to be subtle, Jean Paul, I laughed, feeling the warmth of his welcome melt some of the ice in my chest. But complications arose. Complications? He pulled back, looking at me, then down at Liam. And who is this handsome young man? This is Liam, my date. Enchanté, Liam, Jean-Paul bowed. Jean-Paul, I said, leaning in close so Sophie wouldn't hear from across the room. I have a bit of a situation. My sister, the reservation I called in for the Sterlings, she just informed me there is no room for us at her table. Jean-Paul's eyebrows shot up. He looked over his shoulder at Sophie's booth. He saw them eating the bread, oblivious. His expression darkened instantly. He knew the industry, he knew respect, and he knew exactly how much I had done for this restaurant. She sent you away, he asked, his voice low and dangerous. She tried to, I said, but I'm not leaving. In fact, I'd like to stay, but not with them. Jean-Paul smiled, and it was a smile full of wicked understanding. The chef's table is empty tonight. It was held for a critic who canceled an hour ago. It is yours, and Lydia. Yes. The family and friends discount I applied to the Sterling table. He trailed off, raising an eyebrow. I smiled back. I think since I'm not family tonight, the discount shouldn't apply either. Don't you agree? Jean-Paul's smile widened, a mischievous glint in his eyes that matched M. Why? Understood completely, Mademoiselle Lydia. The discount is removed. They will experience the full value of the gilded spoon tonight. He gestured for the host, snapping his fingers sharply. Escort Ms. Lydia and her son to the chef's table. Bring the sparkling cider for the gentleman, and, he looked at me, the 08 reserve for you. Perfect, I said. As we were led through the dining room, I felt a shift. We weren't just customers anymore, we were royalty. The chef's table wasn't just a table. It was an elevated semicircular booth directly facing the open kitchen, separated from the main floor by a glass partition. It offered privacy, exclusivity, and the best view in the house. From my vantage point, I could see everything. I could see the line cooks moving in their synchronized dance. I could see the expeditor wiping plates. And if I turned my head just slightly to the left, I had a perfect, unobstructed view of table 14. Sophie's table. They were already on appetizers. I watched as waiters swarmed them. Sophie was preening, clearly enjoying the attention, likely assuming it was all part of the VIP treatment she thought she deserved. She didn't realize that the swarm of waiters was actually Jean-Paul's way of ensuring their bill would rack up quickly. Every suggestion, every special of the day, was an upsell. Mom, this is like a spaceship, Liam whispered, climbing into the plush leather booth. It is, isn't it? I smiled, settling in. Now, Liam, tonight you can order whatever you want. No prices, just pick what looks good. Even the steak. Especially the steak. As Liam buried his nose in the menu, I pulled out my phone. It was time to play my hand. I opened my banking app. I had originally linked my card to their reservation file as a backup, intending to cover a portion of the meal as a surprise gift. My congratulations for Oliver. I went into the reservation system portal, access I still had on my phone from the testing phase, and unlinked my card. Delete payment method, confirmed. Next, I texted Jean-Paul, even though he was just across the room. Let's make sure they get the full experience. Suggest the tasting menu, the one with the truffle supplement. Jean-Paul, already done, they ordered the grand degustation. 7 courses, wine pairing for the adults. I nearly choked on my water. The grand degustation was $450 per person. The wine pairing was another $200. With the truffle supplement, they were looking at a mortgage payment. And Sophie, sweet, oblivious Sophie, probably thought I had worked out some friends and family deal where this would cost pennies. I watched as the sommelier approached their table with a bottle of champagne. Oliver nodded sagely as the label was presented. He didn't ask the price. He never did when he thought he was getting a deal. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sophie. Sophie, so glad you guys found somewhere else to eat. It's crazy busy here. Maybe we can do brunch next Sunday? My treat. Somewhere cheaper, lol. I stared at the screen. Somewhere cheaper. The audacity was breathtaking. She was currently eating a meal I had facilitated, drinking wine I had curated, in a restaurant I had helped build, and she was pitying me. I didn't reply. I just raised my glass of the 08 Reserve towards her table. She couldn't see me through the glare of the lights on the glass partition, but I could see her perfectly. "Mom," Liam said, pointing at the menu, "what is Wagyu?" "It's a cow that lived a very happy life," I said, "and it's delicious. You're getting it." I watched the kitchen staff prep our meal. The executive chef, Marco, saw me and waved a tongue in greeting. He sent over an amuse-bouche immediately, tuna tartare on a crispy rice cake, topped with caviar. "Compliments of the chef," the server whispered. I took a bite. It tasted like victory. But I wasn't done. I needed to know the extent of it. I needed to know why tonight. Why the exclusion? I opened Instagram. Sophie had already posted a story, a picture of the champagne glasses clinking. Caption: celebrating my hubby's big promotion. So proud of our little family. Blessed power couple finding. And then I saw the comment from her friend Jessica. "Looks amazing. Is this the big news dinner?" Sophie's reply: "Yes, big announcements coming." Big announcements? Oliver's promotion was already known. What else was there? I zoomed in on the photo. On the table, next to Oliver's phone, was a glossy brochure. I couldn't read the text, but I recognized the logo. St. Jude's Academy. My heart stopped. St. Jude S was the private school Liam had been waitlisted for, the one we couldn't afford without financial aid. The one Sophie knew was my dream for Liam. I squinted. There were 2 brochures, one near Oliver, one near Sophie, and a third document under Oliver's elbow. It looked like a real estate listing. I felt a cold prickle of suspicion. Oliver's promotion came with a raise, sure. But St. Jude's tuition? A new house? Sophie had been complaining about money just last week, asking to borrow $200 for groceries. Something didn't add up. I texted my friend Sarah, who worked in HR at Oliver's company. Me, hey, random question. Did Oliver's promotion come with a massive signing bonus? He's spending like a king tonight. I watched Sarah's typing bubble appear almost instantly. Sarah, promotion? Lydia, Oliver didn't get promoted. He got transferred laterally. Same pay, different title. Actually, rumors are they downsized his department. My blood ran cold. If he didn't get a raise, how were they paying for this? And why lie about the promotion? Then it hit me, the brochure, the family dinner, the exclusion of me and Liam. They weren't celebrating a promotion. They were celebrating a windfall that had to come from somewhere else. I thought about our grandmother's estate. It was still in probate, managed by Oliver's firm. I sat up straighter. The puzzle pieces clicked into a horrifying picture. The realization was a physical jolt, like missing a step in the dark. Grandma's estate. It was supposed to be split 50-50 between Sophie and me. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to change lives, enough for tuition, for a down payment. Oliver's firm was handling the executor duties because he had insisted it would save on fees. If they were spending money they didn't have, on a salary that hadn't increased, were they dipping into the pot before it was distributed? I needed proof, and I needed to ruin their appetite. Liam, stay here for 1 second. Mom needs to say hi to someone. I stood up. I smoothed my dress. I walked out of the VIP section, down the few steps, and onto the main dining floor. The restaurant was buzzing, but to me it was silent. I walked straight toward table 14. I didn't storm, I strolled. I arrived at their table just as the third course, scallops with saffron foam, was being placed down. "Everything looks delicious," I said brightly. Sophie jumped, her fork clattering against the china. Oliver looked up, his face flushing a deep, angry red. "Lydia," Sophie hissed, looking around to see if anyone was watching. "What are you doing here? I thought you left." "We decided to stay," I said, resting my hand on the back of the empty chair, the chair that should have been mine. "The staff found us a table. Actually, they gave us the chef's table." Sophie's eyes widened. The what? The glass booth, I pointed. We've been watching you. You look like you're having fun. Oliver cleared his throat. Well, that's fortunate, but Lydia, we're in the middle of a private conversation. About the promotion, I asked, locking eyes with him, or about the transfer. Oliver froze. The scallop on his fork hovered halfway to his mouth. I don't know what you mean, he stammered. Oh, I think you do, I said, my voice sweet as poisoned honey. I just heard the fascinating news that your promotion is actually a lateral move. No raise, so I was wondering, how exactly are we financing a St. Jude's tuition and a tasting menu that costs more than my monthly rent? Sophie went pale. Lydia, lower your voice. Why? I asked. Are you worried people will hear, or are you worried I will hear? I leaned in closer. Is that why there was no room for us? Because you didn't want me to ask questions about where the money is coming from. You're being paranoid, Oliver spat, regaining some of his arrogance. My finances are none of your business. We have savings. Do you? I asked. Because last week Sophie borrowed $200 for groceries, and now you're drinking. What is that? A 2015 Chateau Margaux. It's a celebration, Sophie cried, her voice rising now, attracting the glances she was so desperate to avoid. Why can't you just be happy for us? Why do you always have to ruin everything? I'm not ruining anything, I said. I'm just clarifying. Because if you're spending my half of Grandma's inheritance before the probate clears, Oliver, that's not just rude. That's embezzlement. The word hung in the air, like a guillotine blade. Oliver's face went from red to white. You have no idea what you're talking about. I am the executor. I have discretionary power. Discretionary power for expenses, I corrected, my corporate background kicking in. Not for personal dining and private school deposits. You're jealous, Sophie spat, tears welling in her eyes, her go-to defense mechanism. You're jealous because we're successful and you're stuck. Stuck, I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Sophie, look around. I gestured to the restaurant. Who do you think designed this lighting? Who chose these linens? Who trained the staff that is currently refilling your water glass? Sophie looked confused. What? I consulted on this restaurant, Sophie. I know the owner. IK. Now the manager. I know the prices. I stood up straight, towering over them as they sat in their booth. I tried to do something nice for you tonight. I really did. But you made it very clear where I stand. So, enjoy the scallops, enjoy the wine, but just so you know, the family discount you were counting on, it's gone. Oliver dropped his fork. What family discount? The one I arranged, I said. The one that would have made this meal affordable. But since I'm not family enough to sit here, I'm certainly not family enough to subsidize your lifestyle. I turned to walk away. Wait, Oliver stood up, panic finally breaking through his facade. Lydia, wait, let's talk about this. Sit down, sir. A waiter appeared instantly at his elbow. Please do not disturb the other guests. I walked back to the chef's table, my heart pounding but my head clear. I had fired the warning shot. Now, I just had to wait for the fallout. When I returned to the chef's table, Liam was happily devouring a slider the size of a teacup. Mom, the chef winked at me, he exclaimed. That's because you're the real VIP, kiddo, I said, sitting down. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. My phone buzzed again. It was Oliver. Oliver, you need to stop making a scene. We can discuss the estate later. Don't do anything rash. Then another. Oliver, if you mess with my reputation at the firm, you'll regret it. I'm warning you. Threats, of course, the last refuge of a guilty man. I didn't reply. Instead, I texted my lawyer, David. He was expensive, but tonight, I felt like money was no object. Me, David, emergency. I have reason to believe the executor of the Miller estate is misappropriating funds. I need an emergency audit filed first thing Monday morning, and I need to freeze the accounts. David, on a Saturday night, Lydia, must be serious. If you have reasonable suspicion, we can file for an injunction. What did you see? Me? He's spending thousands on a dinner he can't afford, boasting about non-existent raises, and I saw a brochure for a private school deposit that matches the exact amount of the initial estate disbursement. David got it. I'll draft the paperwork, don't warn him. I put the phone down, the trap was set, but the night wasn't over. Across the room, the mood at table 14 had shifted drastically. The laughter was gone. Sophie was whispering furiously at Oliver. Oliver was checking his banking app on his phone, looking sweaty. The grand degustation continued to arrive, course 4 roasted duck breast with cherry reduction, but they were barely touching it. They were realizing the math. I watched as Jean-Paul walked by their table. He stopped, not to check on them, but to inspect a water glass on a nearby empty table. Oliver tried to flag him down. "Excuse me, manager," Oliver called out. Jean-Paul turned slowly. "Yes, monsieur." "There seems to be a misunderstanding about the bill," Oliver said, his voice tight. "My sister-in-law, she works here." "Ms. Lydia," Jean-Paul smiled. "She is a valued consultant, one of the best." "Right, well, she mentioned a discount. We just want to confirm that's still active." Jean-Paul's face became a mask of polite confusion. "Active? Monsieur, discounts are discretionary. They are extended to friends and family of the house, since Ms. Lydia is dining separately, and you indicated she was not part of your party. Surely you understand." "But we are family," Sophie cried out. "She's my sister." "Ah," Jean-Paul nodded sagely. "But earlier, the reservation was quite specific. Only room for 4. The system reflects what the customer requests." He bowed slightly. "Enjoy the duck, it is exquisite." He walked away. Oliver slumped back in his seat. Sophie put her head in her hands. I felt a twinge of pity, just a twinge. It was the old instinct, the one that wanted to fix things for her. But then I looked at Liam, happily eating his ice cream, completely unaware that his aunt had deemed him unworthy of a seat. I killed the pity. The waiter brought our dessert, a chocolate soufflé for me, a giant sundae for Liam. "Mom," Liam said around a mouthful of fudge, "this is the best night ever." "It is, isn't it?" Suddenly my phone rang. It wasn't a text, it was a call from Mom. Our mother, who usually avoided conflict at all costs, was calling at 8:30 p.m. on a Saturday. Sophie must have texted her. I answered, "Hi, Mom." "Lydia, what on earth is going on?" Mom's voice was shrill. "Sophie is texting me in tears. She says you're at the restaurant harassing them. She says you're trying to get them kicked out." "I'm eating dinner, Mom," I said calmly. "Sophie invited us, remember? Then she told us there was no room, so we got our own table." "Well, she says you're threatening Oliver. Something about the estate? Lydia, you know Oliver is handling that. Why do you have to be so difficult? They're just trying to have a nick." "Night." "They're spending Grandma's money, Mom," I said bluntly. Silence on the other end. "What?" "Oliver didn't get a raise," I said, laying it out. "He got a lateral transfer, but they're spending thousands of dollars tonight. They're putting a deposit on St. Jude S. Where do you think that money is coming from?" That's a serious accusation, Lydia." "I know. That's why I'm having my lawyer freeze the accounts on Monday." "Lydia, don't you dare," Mom panicked. "You'll tear this family apart." "They tore it apart when they left Liam standing in the foyer," I said, my voice shaking with sudden emotion. "They tore it apart when they decided I was only useful when I was giving them things. I'm done, Mom. I'm done being the doormat." I hung up, my hand was trembling. I looked up. Oliver was standing up again. He had downed 3 glasses of wine in the last hour. He was swaying slightly. He was angry, and he was coming over. He bypassed the staff-only rope and marched up the steps to the chef's table. "You," he pointed a finger at me, his face was twisted. "You ungrateful little." "Sir," a sous chef stepped forward, brandishing a ladle like a weapon. "Back away." "I'm talking to my sister-in-law," Oliver shouted. The entire restaurant went silent. "Oliver, sit down," I said, not moving from my seat. "You're making a scene." "You called your mother," he slurred slightly. You trying to poison everyone against me after everything I've done. Everything you've done? I stood up then. Like stealing from the estate, like lying to your wife about your job. I didn't steal, he yelled. I borrowed. I was going to put it back when the bonus came in next quarter. Gasps rippled through the dining room. He had just admitted it, loudly. Sophie had followed him up the stairs. She froze. Oliver, what did you say? Oliver looked at her, realizing his mistake. Sophie, it's complicated. You borrowed, Sophie's voice was a whisper, from the estate. We needed the tuition, Oliver pleaded. For the image, you wanted the school, Sophie, you wanted the life. I didn't want you to steal from my grandmother, she screamed. It was chaos, beautiful, vindicating chaos. Jean Paul appeared at the bottom of the stairs, 2 large security guards behind him. Mr. Sterling, Jean Paul said, his voice ice cold. You are disturbing my guests, and you have admitted to a crime in front of 50 witnesses. I think it is time for the check. The silence that followed Jean Paul's declaration was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. The ambient noise of the restaurant, the clinking silverware, the low hum of conversation, had evaporated. Every eye in the establishment was fixed on the drama unfolding on the steps of the chef's table. Oliver stood there, his chest heaving, his face a mottled canvas of red rage and pale fear. He looked small. Stripped of his bluster, stripped of the successful executive costume he wore so tightly, he was just a desperate man who had been caught red-handed. The check, Oliver repeated, his voice cracking. Fine, bring it, we're leaving. Excellent, Jean Paul said, his tone clipped and professional. He didn't move. He simply raised a hand, and a server appeared instantly with a black leather folder. It was thick, heavy. Jean Paul took it and descended the steps, walking Oliver back to table 14 like a principal escorting a truant student. Sophie followed, looking like she was walking to the gallows. I stayed in my seat, watching from above like a judge on a dais. Liam had stopped eating his sundae, sensing the shift in the air. Is Uncle Oliver in trouble? He whispered. Yes, baby, I said softly. Big trouble. I watched as they reached their booth. Oliver sat down heavily. Sophie stood by the edge of the table, her arms crossed, refusing to sit next to him. Jean Paul placed the folder on the table. He didn't just drop it, he presented it with a flourish. Oliver opened it. Even from across the room, I saw the flinch. It was a physical recoil, as if the paper had bitten him. He stared at the number. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and stared again. This, Oliver spluttered, his voice rising again, carrying across the silent room. This is a mistake. This is $3,400. $3,412, Jean Paul corrected smoothly. Plus gratuity, of course. For dinner, Oliver shrieked. This is robbery, this is price gouging. It is the menu you ordered, monsieur, Jean Paul said, his voice projecting so the nearby tables could hear. The grand degustation, 7 courses, the white truffle supplement from Alba, the Wagyu beef upgrade, and of course the 2015 Chateau Margaux and the champagne toast. You consumed it all. Very enthusiastically, I might add. But, Oliver looked around wildly. His eyes locked onto me up in the glass booth. Lydia, tell him about the discount. Toed up slowly. I walked to the glass railing. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. The acoustics carried my voice perfectly. There is no discount, Oliver, I said. Discounts are for family, and as you pointed out when we arrived. There was only room for 4. You wanted to be the big man. You wanted the private celebration. You wanted the VIP treatment. Well, this is the price of admission. I can't pay this, Oliver yelled, slamming his hand on the table. I don't have $3,000 liquid right now. You just said you borrowed from the estate, Sophie's voice cut through the noise. It was quiet, deadly. She picked up the check and looked at it. Her hands were shaking. You told me you had a bonus. You told me we were celebrating. And now you're saying you can't even pay for the dinner you ordered. Sophie, listen, Oliver pleaded, sweat beading on his forehead. It's a cash flow issue. The assets are tied up. My grandmother's assets, Sophie corrected. She looked at him with a look of pure revulsion. It was the look of a woman realizing she had been sleeping next to a stranger. You lied about the job. You lied about the money. Did you lie about the school too? Did you even send the deposit? Oliver looked down at his shoes. That silence was the loudest answer of all. Oh my God, Sophie breathed. She backed away from the table. You fraud. I have a corporate card. Oliver scrambled, pulling a sleek black card from his wallet. I'll put it on the firm. I'll figure it out Monday. He handed the card to Jean-Paul. Jean-Paul took it, looking bored. He walked to the portable terminal the server was holding. He inserted the card. We waited, the machine beeped, a harsh, dissonant buzz. Declined, Jean-Paul said loudly. Try it again, Oliver insisted. It's a platinum card. It is a cancelled card, monsieur, Jean-Paul said, looking at the screen. The issuer signals card not authorized. It seems the firm has deactivated your privileges. The room gasped. It was the final nail. The lateral transfer wasn't just a transfer. He had likely been stripped of all power, perhaps even fired, and was hiding it. Oliver slumped into the booth, burying his face in his hands. The facade had completely crumbled. The arrogant executive was gone, replaced by a terrified man in a suit he couldn't afford. I have another card, Oliver mumbled, reaching for his personal wallet. My debit. Stop, Sophie said. She reached into her purse. She pulled out her own card, a simple bank card from her personal account, the one she used for her Etsy shop earnings. I'll pay for my half, and the kids. Madame, Jean-Paul said gently, the bill is one check. Sophie looked at the bill again. She looked at Oliver, who was sobbing quietly now. She looked up at me. There were tears streaming down her face. Her makeup was ruined. The perfect image was shattered. Lydia, she whispered. She mouthed the word help. I looked at her. I saw my sister. Not the snob, not the bully, but the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I saw a woman who had been deceived, manipulated, and humiliated far worse than I had been. But I also saw Liam. I saw the way she had looked through him in the foyer. I saw the years of her taking my help and spitting in my face. I can't help you, Sophie, I said, my voice steady but sad. I really can't. You chose him, you chose the table, you chose the life. I turned to Jean-Paul. If they cannot pay, Jean-Paul, you know the protocol. Indeed, Jean-Paul said. Police, theft of services. No, Sophie screamed. No police, I'll call Dad, I'll call Dad. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling so hard she dropped it once. She dialed. She put it on speaker, her desperation making her forget privacy. Dad, she sobbed when he answered. Dad, I need you. I'm at the Gilded Spoon. Oliver lied about everything. We can't pay the bill. They're going to call the police. I could hear my father's confused, booming voice on the other end. What? Where is Lydia? Isn't she there? She is, Sophie cried, looking up at me. She's here. She's watching. Put her on, Dad demanded. Sophie held the phone up toward me. Lydia, Dad's voice echoed. Fix this. Pay the bill and we'll settle up later. I looked at the phone. For 30 years, that had been the dynamic. Lydia, fix it. Lydia, clean up the mess. No, Dad, I said. Not this time. Lydia. I'm taking Liam for ice cream, I said. Sophie can wait for you to drive down. It's 45 minutes. Jean-Paul will wait. I signaled to the waiter. Wrap up the rest of the steak for the dog, please, and we're ready for our check. Jean-Paul waved his hand. Your check is taken care of, Lydia, on the house. Thank you, Jean-Paul, I said. I took Liam's hand. We walked down the stairs. We had to walk right past table 14 to leave. I didn't stop, I didn't. Look at Oliver, who was a broken heap in the corner. I looked briefly at Sophie. She was sobbing into the phone, explaining to our father why she needed $3,000. Goodbye, Sophie, I said softly. She didn't answer, she just wept. We walked out the heavy oak doors into the warm night air. The humidity had broken. A cool breeze was blowing. "Did we win, Mom?" Liam asked, looking up at me. I squeezed his hand, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Yeah, buddy, we won." The fallout was swift, brutal, and thoroughly documented. By Monday morning, my lawyer, David, had the injunction filed. By Tuesday, the audit of Grandma's estate was underway. It didn't take a forensic accountant to find the holes. Oliver had been sloppy. He had borrowed nearly $40,000 over 6 months, tuition deposits, lease payments on a luxury SUV, and credit card bills. He claimed he intended to pay it back. The judge didn't care about intentions. He was removed as executor immediately and ordered to repay every cent within 30 days or face criminal charges for embezzlement. His firm was less forgiving. It turned out the lateral transfer was actually a probation period due to performance issues. When the news of the theft of services police report, which Jean Paul had filed as a formality until my father arrived to pay the bill, reached his HR department, they fired him for conduct unbecoming. Sophie didn't stay. She couldn't. The house of cards collapsed the moment the money stopped flowing. They lost the house they were renting. Oliver moved into a motel. Sophie and the kids moved back in with our parents. I didn't visit them. I stayed away. I focused on my work on Liam and on rebuilding my own peace. 2 months later, on a crisp October afternoon, my doorbell rang. I checked the camera. It was Sophie. She looked different. The expensive highlights were grown out. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, not the designer labels she used to flaunt. She looked tired. She looked older. I hesitated, then opened the door. "Hi," she said, standing on the mat. She didn't try to come in. "Hi," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "I brought Liam's jacket," she said, holding up a windbreaker Liam had left at Grandma's house months ago. "Mom found it." "Thanks," I took it. She lingered. She looked past me into the apartment. It was cozy, warm, smelling of cinnamon candles. "It looks nice in there." "It is," I said. "Lydia," she started, then stopped. She took a deep breath. "I'm sorry." I waited. "I'm sorry for the dinner," she said. "I'm sorry for the years before the dinner. I was so desperate to be what Oliver wanted me to be. I wanted to be the rich sister, the successful one, and I treated you like dirt to make myself feel taller." Tears welled in her eyes, but these weren't the manipulative tears of the restaurant. These were real. "He's gone," she said. "I filed for divorce. Dad is helping me with the lawyers. I'm getting a job, receptionist at a dental office. It's not much, but..." "It's honest," I said. "Yeah," she laughed, a watery, sad sound. "It's honest." She looked at me, really looked at me. "You were right, Lydia, about everything. You were the strong one. You were always the strong one. I was just empty." I looked at her. I didn't feel the urge to fix her. I didn't feel the urge to save her. But I did feel the anger finally, truly, evaporate. "I appreciate you saying that, Sophie," I said. "Can I?" She hesitated. "Can I maybe see Liam sometime? I know I don't deserve it, but Noah and Emma miss him." I thought about it. I thought about the toxicity. But I also thought about Liam, who had asked about his cousins just yesterday. "Not yet," I said firmly. "You have work to do, Sophie. You need to figure out who you are without the money and the husband. When you're solid, really solid, then we can talk about a playdate." She nodded, accepting the boundary. "Okay, that's fair." She turned to leave. "Sophie," I called out. She turned back. "The dental office," I said. "They have terrible branding. Their logo looks like a tooth with a cavity." She blinked, then a small, genuine smile touched her lips. "It really does." "Tell them to call me," I said. "I'll give them the family discount." She laughed then, a real laugh. "Thanks, Lydia." I closed the door. I walked back into the living room where Liam was building a Lego castle on the rug. He looked up, his face lighting up. "Who was that?" "Just Aunt Sophie," I said, sitting down beside him. "Is she coming in?" "No," I said, picking up a blue brick and placing it on the highest tower. "Not today, Today, it's just us. Just us, Liam repeated happily. The best team. The best team, I agreed. I looked around my apartment. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't a VIP booth. But it was mine. It was paid for. And it was filled with real, unbought love. There was plenty of room, Ray, but only for the people who mattered.